and welcome to the Madness and Meaning podcast. This episode today, we're still sort of unclear on the specific direction that we want to go with it. We have some ideas kind of floating around that have felt sort of, well, I mainly introduced this topic because it's been a topic kind of close to my mind and my heart lately that I've been both moving through in a personal way, but also trying to learn how to articulate it in a way that's going to resonate with people because I know this is something that so many people, actually, scratch that, literally everyone I've ever worked with as a coach has struggled with in some capacity. And it's this idea of, I think, what all of us can resonate with, at least on some level, of going through the motions, which to me basically is just this experience where we're just kind of getting by. Like we're doing things because we have to do them. Anything that we're doing for quote unquote fun doesn't even really feel that fun because we're just doing it because we're supposed to. Everything sort of just feels like it's a means to an end. Adding anything more to our lives feels totally impossible because we're already so exhausted just doing the bare minimum that we're doing to try to get by and survive and meet expectations and be a good person and whatever it is. And it just sort of feels like we're in a rut in some way. I've lived so much of my life in this state. And I would say only very recently have I started to really experience what it's like to have my head above that water and to feel like I have generally just the energy to pour into a life that actually I want to engage in, that brings me joy, that feels exciting. And I remember for a long time, I would look to people who had a very abundant social life or wanted to go out on the weekends and go hiking and go on like weekend trips and do all of these things and try new hobbies and whatever. And I would just be like, how? Like, how do they have the energy for that? Where do they actually find the desire inside of them to want to do those things? Because to me, I always felt like, I have so much that I'm telling myself I need to do and that I should be doing. And then if I'm not doing those things, then I have to be resting so that I get the energy to do those things. And it just felt like a never-ending cycle of like, I'm just trying to do everything that I can to get by, and I have nothing left to give. And I have no desire to give anything else. And it just felt very unfulfilling. It felt very dull. It felt like every day I was just waking up with this just massive burden on my chest that I had to try to carry with me throughout the entire day. And so I don't really know where we're going to go with this specifically. I just think that it's interesting for us to explore what is actually going on an internal level when we are experiencing this going through the motions or being in a rut, not really feeling inspired or excited or engaged with life. And then maybe we can talk about the experiences that we've had of moving out of that place and what we had to do to participate in our lives a little bit more fully.
Yeah, it's a very interesting idea that, we come here to have a human experience, and the whole beauty of it is the freedom of choice, right? We get to choose all of our experiences, and that can feel so empowering to know. And inside of the power of choice, we tend to choose the same things over and over and over again, even if we're not fully fulfilled by them or happy inside of them. We can see that there's a different choice available to us, or we know that we want something different, but we continue to choose the same things over and over and over again. And I have noticed this a lot inside of the work with my clients where they so clearly want something, but they continue to hold back from taking one small step forward in a new way. And that was always something that I never fully understood. I understood the reason why, and we can get into that. But knowing how to guide them forward in a different way always felt challenging for me as a coach because that was never my mode of operation. For me, it was always making taking the action necessary to get me to the end result that I wanted was never hard. It was always something that I just threw myself into full throttle until recently, where I've noticed that there's one aspect of my life where I'm continuously making the opposite choice that's getting me the result that I don't want over and over and over again.
What
And
is it?
so, yeah, so for me, it's I moved to a different country. I moved from Canada to the US. I didn't know anybody here, had no connections, had to build my business from scratch, had to find a job from scratch, had to find a community from scratch. And it's been very challenging for me to make friendships. And so it's been like 9 years. That's a long time. For whatever reason, I have held back from making a real effort to go out and be social, even though I am beginning to feel the effects of that and the loneliness that comes from that and the isolation that comes from that. I'm still refusing to do anything differently. And that's new for me.
Yeah.
I've never had that issue before. And so, I mean, we can talk about this from any of those different perspectives, but I have noticed that there are kind of two modes of operation. One is that it depends on the pain point. One is that it's more painful to take action on something and potentially have it not work out in the way you want it to than not take action and stay where you are is one option, which I find is more common. Or the other one is it's more painful to stay where you are and know that it's on you than it is to take action and potentially fail or not have the desired outcome that you want. And so it depends on where that pain point is, which can determine which path you take.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really resonate with what you're saying about like having experienced in most of the most prominent areas of your life being someone that when you want to change something, you just do it. You
Yeah.
take action on it in a way where it's like, if I don't like this, I'm going to do something about it. And you and I were just having this conversation before we even started this podcast of how like so much of our energy seems to, both of us seems to be entirely career based. Like all of our focus, all of our problems, all of our fears, all of our like needing to grow and wanting to grow and desires are somehow intertwined into our career. It feels like it's taken the majority of our energy and our focus for as long as we can remember. And in because that's such a big area of our lives, I think we've both also more often than not operated from this place of if there's something that I want to change, I'm going to do everything that I can to try to change it. If I want to try to grow my business, I'm going to do everything I can to figure out how to do that. If I feel like I need to make more money, I'm going to try to figure out how to do that. Like if I'm not feeling fulfilled in the work that I'm doing, I'm going to do everything that I can to try to figure that out and change it. There's never been this doesn't really feel good for me. This isn't what I want. So I'm just going to like stay in it anyways in our career. That's just never really been the mode of operating for us. Also thinking about another large aspect of my life where I have operated in a similar way is with like my body and health and fitness, where there was a point where I literally just could not resonate with someone who didn't like how they looked and felt in their body and wouldn't do anything about it. Because I was like, I'm doing everything that I can constantly to like try to feel good in my body. That's a whole other conversation and it was a whole other problem in and of itself.
Yeah.
But it was an area of my life where I just was like, oh, I can't relate. I can't
Yeah.
relate to
Same
identifying
with
that there's
me.
a problem. Yeah.
And not
And then not
doing
doing anything.
everything.
That's it.
Everything. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But similarly to you, I have also found myself in this rut of my relationship and social life has never really been prioritized. It's never really felt all that full or abundant or exciting or joyful or something that was giving me something in my life. And I think for a long time, I didn't really realize that was something I even wanted. I think I convinced myself, I don't care. I'd rather just focus on my career and myself
Yeah.
and
No, that's me
all of those
too.
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe I was right about that for a while. Maybe I genuinely didn't care, but like you said,
Yes.
More recently, I'm starting to notice the consequences of that not being a full part of my life, and the loneliness and just the isolation that comes from that not being where I ultimately want it to be. And even so, as I was starting to notice that, I would look to other people who had a really full social life or had things that they were doing on the weekend or had hobbies that they were doing and had like different circles of friends that they were doing different things with. I would look to people like that and be like, oh, that sounds so fun. Or like, that would be cool to
Mhm.
have that in my life. And I could also justify it in so many ways of like, also, that would probably make me not as crazy about my business if it wasn't the only thing I had going in my life. It would probably take my focus that's too obsessively on certain things in my life and spread it out in a more healthy way that would actually probably help the areas of my life that are important to me, like my career and health and all of those things. But even so, I was really stuck inside of that rut for a long time where I wouldn't put myself out there socially. Even when full disclosure, even when I was living my best life externally, traveling the world for like 2 years, going to a different country every few weeks, and just like living in hostels and meeting all of these people and doing all of these really cool things, it still felt like it was so much effort to put myself out there and to choose doing something that was like spontaneous or different. Like someone would invite me to go on this like tour with them, and I would be like, ugh. Like, I just couldn't fathom having the desire or having the energy. I wanted to. I wanted to be as excited as other people were to do new things, to go see this new town or to go to this like tourist place or to go on a tour or to like go kayaking or go to a waterfall. I'm like, the idea of liking doing that sounds good, but I feel like all of my energy is being poured into these buckets, my career, my personal growth, my, workouts and whatever it is, that I still kept choosing to not do those things. Or if I did say yes, because I was telling myself that I should, I wouldn't be fully present in it. And then I wouldn't end up enjoying it. And then I would end up using that to justify, oh, maybe I just don't do those types of things. Or maybe I'm just not interested in doing those types of things. And it just kind of kept me cycling in this rut of going through the motions, not really doing anything that felt fun or enjoyable in any way or fulfilling.
So you picked up on there's a pain point there, which is kind of keeping you in this cycle of choosing the same thing, which is that if you chose something different and did something different that required more energy of you, it would take time away from your business. Maybe you would lose track of what you were doing there. You would expend all this energy in a different place where maybe you wouldn't have the energy to then focus on your business, or you would have to put yourself in a position where you would have to be slightly uncomfortable doing something that felt uncomfortable in front of people you didn't know that well, and having to put on a version of you that is not entirely maybe authentic, which feels more uncomfortable, expels more energy. Does any of that resonate for you in terms of
Totally.
how that might have kept you in that loop?
Yes, all of that. And just the constant questioning of whether it was even worth it or whether it was something that I wanted. Because, like I said, when I would like say yes to doing something or going to hang out with someone spontaneously or going to do this tour or whatever, I would always just be, like I said, not present. My mind would be somewhere else. I would be focusing on what I'm not doing because I'm doing this instead. And then it would just kind of confirm that, oh, that wasn't worth it, or I didn't even enjoy that, or maybe I'm just not someone that likes to do things like this, or maybe I just don't really, maybe I'm just introverted and I can't be that social. Even though there was a very strong growing and becoming more and more undeniable aspect of me that was saying, but I want a more full life. I want to be social. I want to have friends. I want to be doing things outside of work. I want to be doing hobbies. I want to be just doing spontaneous adventures and seeing the world and seeing different things. I want to be someone that wants to do those things. but I just couldn't break out of this cycle of either not wanting to do it, not choosing it, or choosing it and then not being able to actually enjoy it or to be present inside of it.
So if you're listening to this, you probably resonate with this on some level. Maybe it shows up for you as an entrepreneur and you understand exactly what we're talking about, where if it's an activity that takes away from your focus on your business, then you find it very challenging to leave the comfort of your computer to go and do it, even though it's something that you tell yourself you want. Or maybe you are someone that Kelly was talking about, where you want to change an aspect of your body. You want to lose weight, you want to gain weight, you want to change your shape, some part of your appearance, but you find yourself consistently making choices that are in opposition to the thing you tell yourself you want. Or I've noticed within clients that come to me where they want to explore their spirituality. They want to create a part of their life where they're using their gifts in some capacity, but they're continuously choosing not to. If if you're working with someone, Kelly, that you're noticing this pattern coming up for them where they have the power of choice and they have a desire and they're consistently choosing something different and they're stuck in this rut, how do you work with them to overcome that and create the momentum required to make a different choice and then do it consistently?
One of the first things that I introduce to someone is just expanding on what you already introduced us into earlier around the pain point, like where the pain point is. And I do this by usually creating a conversation around identifying what is the pain of staying the same and what's the pain of changing. What is the pleasure that you get from changing and what is the pleasure that you get from staying the same? Because there's going to be answers to all of those. And the reality is that if the pain of changing what you're doing or the pain or the fear associated with living your life differently than you currently are, making different choices than you currently are, is perceived as bigger or scarier or less tolerable than the discomfort that you feel staying the same, then you're always going to choose staying the same because it's less uncomfortable. It's less painful. And it doesn't really matter if you can come up with all of these benefits that you're going to get from changing. Like, let's say, for example, it's like you were saying, being more committed to your health, taking care of yourself, working out, feeling good in your body. Many people that have that as a goal can list a trillion reasons why their life would be better if they started making those choices more consistently. I'll have more energy. I'll feel more confident. I will feel like my relationships are better. My sex life will be better. I'll be able to chase my kids around. I'll be able to go and do adventures on the weekend. I won't be so tired. I won't be so what like there's so many pleasure points that people can point out that's going to it would technically make their life better. But if they're not choosing it, it's because whether they have realized it or not, they have pain or discomfort associated with making different choices that outweighs all of those things. And that pain can be as simple as um, it means that they're going to have to get uncomfortable or that they're going to have to add more things to their to-do list when they're already exhausted. Like for a lot of people, the idea of having to focus on something that feels really new and push themselves to make different choices and go to the gym and be more active is like it feels like an impossible feat because they're already so exhausted. And let's not like overlook the pain of that because I think a lot of people want to, because a lot of people are like, just do it and push through and
Yeah.
like the pain of staying the same is worse than the pain at the gym and like whatever bullshit motivation we're told. But like in reality, that feels like a really, really big pain point for a lot of people is just like the effort they're going to have to put into it that they don't feel capable of putting in, or they feel like it's just going to be exhausting.
Yes. And something I want to highlight that you just like touched on is that we we have our like conscious understanding of all of this, all of these outcomes that we're secretly afraid of. Um, but it's so much deeper and more nuanced than that. It's not necessarily the outcome of this not working out or this taking away from something else or this not being working out in the way you wanted it to or not being possible or probable for you. It's like the feeling associated with your worst, most feared, most fearful reality coming into existence is ultimately what you're trying to avoid. And we just are not fully consciously aware of what that is. And so we come up with all of these reasons why we don't want to do the thing that we tell ourselves we want to do. But ultimately, there's a, a deep underlying doubt or fear that you would be required to feel that you are really avoiding here. It's the reality of an aspect of you that will become realized that you will have to sit and feel. And it's that experience of you that you are trying desperately to avoid. And so I think, just to use myself for an example, if I take time away from my business and I go out and I try to make friends, I am putting myself in a position where I have to be very vulnerable about who I am now, because ultimately I'm going to be asked, what do you do for a living?
Worst
And
question
that
ever.
that has become a very challenging question for me to answer for many different reasons. And it's not necessarily just answering the question. It's in answering the question, I am revealing an aspect of who I am that I am still not 100% comfortable with. And now I have to be faced with all of their potential discomfort being reflected back to me and amplifying the discomfort that's already there. And that is ultimately what I am avoiding by staying in my space, is because I don't have to face that.
Mhm. I love this angle that you're taking in and how you gave that example because ultimately everything that we're avoiding comes down to a feeling
Yeah.
or an experience of ourselves. And we can give more examples of this. If someone is struggling to make decisions that are going to honor their desire to be healthier or fitter or to take care of themselves more, then the experience of themselves or the feeling that is associated with them making different decisions that feels more important to avoid than avoiding the discomfort of staying where they are might be the discomfort of having to experience other people's resistance to their changing decisions. Like if you have family members, for example, or friends that know you as a certain version of yourself, where you make these decisions, you go out to dinner and you always order everything and you drink and you are available at everyone's beck and call. If you start making decisions that are going to honor you and your health and your well-being, then you're going to have to experience the discomfort of other people not liking this new version of you or not being comfortable over the fact that you're changing and they're having to adapt to the changing you. And that can feel really confronting and really vulnerable to face. That's one example of what version of us or what feeling we have to face in that scenario. It could also be like we are talking about earlier, the discomfort of having to face this version of us that feels very exhausted or is in struggle trying to maintain all of these new habits. Like if I were to really commit to my health, that means I have to go to the gym. That means I have to say no to this. That means I have to meal prep. That means that, and not necessarily, I'm not going to get into the details of it, but someone might have a story or a picture in their mind of them being in a position where they're telling themselves that they've committed to making all of these new choices and they're exhausted and they don't want to do it, and there's stressful things happening at their job, and there's stressful things happening in their relationships, and they're still having to make these different choices, and it feels really overwhelming. And then them having to sit in the discomfort of, I've told myself that I need to make these choices for myself, but it's feeling really hard. And if I don't do it, then I'm going to feel bad and I'm going to feel guilty for it. But if I do it, then I'm going to feel overwhelmed and stressed out, and I'm not going to be able to give myself the break that I feel that I need. And it just is this experience of overwhelm and questioning that someone can avoid through simply just deciding to keep making the same decisions and staying the same.
One thing that I really want to touch on is that if that underlying fear is there, it's going to be there regardless of the choice that you make. If you choose the same thing over and over and over again, I mean, the fear exists inside of you, so you're going to be feeling it regardless. So you're making the same choices over and over again. That fear is there, lingering under the surface. You make a different choice, have a different experience, that fear still exists.
Yeah,
But I think the reason why it feels easier to choose the same thing over choosing the new thing is that it's familiar. The discomfort is there regardless, but one you're familiar with and one you're not.
that's right. That is such a good point. And I want to ground that it even more using your example. So, can we talk about when you were saying the discomfort of you putting yourself out there socially means you're going to have to face the discomfort of putting yourself out there, being asked the question, what it is that you do for work, et cetera, having to be vulnerable and open with new people. What you're saying here is that that discomfort and that fear is already here. It already
Yes.
exists inside of you,
Yes.
even though you're not out there being asked what you do for work and putting yourself out there socially. Can you expand on that and give people a little bit more of an idea of what you mean by that and how
Yeah.
you experience that in your life now?
Something that you said on the podcast that I haven't forgotten because it was just so brilliant. I'm going to say it right now. On a previous episode, you said somebody else can't make you feel a certain way. They can only evoke a feeling that has already been there inside of you because the way that you feel is inherent to a conscious belief system. And it is your belief systems and your action on those belief systems that create the reality of your entire existence. And so for me, having to change my line of work, not having to, choosing to change my line of work has been birthed from an evolution of who I am. Over the course of the last few years, I have changed so drastically as a person that I have decided to choose a different line of work to reflect who I'm becoming. But there's a part of me that still feels massively uncomfortable inside of it. Let me see if I can like fully articulate what it is. It, what I do for a living requires me to be so vulnerable because I am talking about things that I don't fully understand yet, and I don't have proof of, and I am exposing that to the world that I believe in these things and I don't have a way to prove that they're real or that they exist. And in doing so, I'm feeling doubtful of it on an unconscious deep level. And if someone else is feeling that too, and I'm expressing what I do for a living and what I believe in, and I'm watching their doubt on their face, and I'm witnessing their discomfort inside of what I am suggesting because they don't fully buy into it. And now they're calling into question their belief systems because what I am presenting them with, they are simply mirroring back to me all of those same feelings that I'm already feeling. They are not giving me those feelings. Those feelings are already there. They're just being brought to the surface because I am seeing them reflected back to me. that make
Yes.
sense?
It is such a perfect way of putting this.
Okay.
I'm so happy that we went here in this conversation because this is so important to understand. And I love that you referenced that quote that I said. I had no idea what you were going to say that I said in a previous podcast. No clue, but I do remember saying that now because I definitely say that a lot. And it's such a big point because when we can recognize that one, everything that we're avoiding, that we're trying to run away from, is a feeling, is an experience of us. And therefore, everything that we're running from, aka a feeling, is something that's already in us. If we can recognize those two things. Okay, I'm glad you saw that too. I don't know what's going on with my Zoom lately. It just randomly gives me balloons and thumbs up sometimes. If you're watching on
I think
YouTube,
Zoom is just celebrating your brilliance. If you're listening to this,
thanks,
Kelly
Zoom.
was talking and these all these balloons just went across her screen.
This keeps happening and it's so funny every time. I don't know what's going on, but thank you, Zoom, for celebrating that I'm on a flow right now. So, if we can recognize that everything we're running from is a feeling, and that every feeling that we're running from is a feeling that's already there, it can't be given to us from a person or a situation, then where does that lead us to? Leads us to recognizing that there's a feeling in our body that we are running from, but we can't. We're trying to, but it's always going to be there. And the more we run from it, the more we're going to feel like we have to keep running from it. And that's going to be one way of choosing to live our lives is trying to run away from an experience of ourselves or a feeling. But if we're coming up against this pattern where we say we want something different for ourselves, we want to create a different life for ourselves, but we're not making the choices that are associated with those changes because we're trying to avoid a feeling that we're feeling anyway, then that starts to steer us in a different direction of maybe I need to get more comfortable with this feeling that is in my body that I'm avoiding so that I can feel more safe to make the decisions that are going to force me to face that feeling in a bigger way. Because that feeling's going to be here regardless. I can keep trying to distract myself from it in these familiar ways that are keeping me unhappy and stuck. Or I can liberate myself from the need to avoid myself and to avoid my feelings, which, in my personal opinion, is a much better way to live. It works out way better in my experience. And so, coming back to some of the examples that we were giving, in I think using the health and the fitness example is really easy for these things. And so, if someone is saying they want to be healthier and take care of themselves, but they're not making the choices to do so because they're afraid of having to face, for example, the feeling of discomfort when other people resist them changing. When other people make comments like, oh, you're no fun anymore, or people getting upset over the fact that you're not going to bend over backwards for them anymore because you're making yourself more of a priority. Whatever that looks like, you having to face that discomfort, you're already feeling that discomfort, first of all. That's what's driving you to people please. That's what's driving you to make the decisions that you're making because you feel uncomfortable in making yourself a priority, of choosing yourself, of um, doing things for yourself because as you were saying, Amanda, all of these feelings are related back to a conscious belief system. You have a belief system that makes you selfish, that you shouldn't make other people feel comfortable, that your worth and your value is rooted in how much you give up for yourself for other people. As these are just some specific examples. And so that already exists in you. That's already a feeling that you're carrying, the feeling of guilt, the feeling of being wrong, the feeling of shame for not being who it is that you think you need to be in order to be liked, acceptable, and worthy on the outside. So by you making the decision to prioritize yourself, to show up for yourself in a bigger way, to stop putting everyone else and everything else above your well-being and above what it is that you want, it's going to evoke those feelings more strongly. They're already there, but it's going to evoke them more strongly. It's going to force you to have to face them in a bigger way than you currently are when you're living your life the way that you are. But that doesn't have to be a bad thing. In fact, I want to invite everyone into the perspective that by facing those feelings more fully, they're less scary. They're way less scary. The feeling of someone judging you is terrifying before someone judges you. As soon as someone judges you, you realize, okay.
Well, it's because it's not the feeling that's the hard part. It's the association of the feeling. It's the relationship with the feeling. It's a thought about the feeling that's creating the fear of the feeling.
Yes. Yeah. The resistance to a feeling is way harder than the feeling itself.
And I think that I, I, not I think, I have witnessed a lot of resistance to this notion, which is that how could you say that suffering, for example, becomes easier when you let it in? If you let it in, you'll feel it more. And then that's much harder
Mhm.
than resisting it.
I get
Thank you.
that.
Thank you, internet comments
Oh,
for
is that
that.
what someone commented?
Oh, not just someone, lots of people.
Oh,
So
wow, brilliant. Let's
I would,
address it.
I would love to give you the opportunity to speak into that.
Yes, I am so ready to speak into this because this is something that I have explored within myself. And then as I started to define my own insights around this, started to introduce this exploration into the work that I've had with clients. And it's been one of my favorite things
Oh,
because
cool.
it's so profound in my experience, where on the surface makes perfect sense what they're saying, right? If I let myself feel suffering or I accept feeling bad or whatever it is, it's going to become bigger. It's going to become more ever overwhelming. It's going to consume me. And usually we associate that experience with something we had in the past, where maybe we call it depression, maybe we call it just this really hard period of life that you went through at one point that you're like, never want to experience that again because that was so hard. And now that I'm over it, now that I've overcome it, I need to make sure I never go back there. I sometimes call this the experience in the box that we hide in the deepest, darkest corner of our mind and sit on top of it and create an entire world around making sure that box never gets opened. That's what we're trying to avoid. And so when we have resistance to feeling, it's because we think that by opening the box, it's going to consume us. But that's because we're associating that hard time in our life, that depression, that just really, really deep struggle period of life that we had came from feeling a feeling. The reason why we struggled was because we felt this feeling. The reason why I struggled is because I had grief. The reason why I struggled is because I felt insecure. The reason why I struggled is because I was really sad and heartbroken. Whatever it was, right? We think it was the feeling that caused that experience to be so insufferable. But what I've discovered and explored for myself is every time I've went through a period of my life where it was really hard and insufferable, it wasn't the feeling that caused it. It was my resistance to the feeling because I was not allowing myself to feel. I was feeling something or something was being evoked in me and I was making that wrong. I was telling myself, I can't feel this because I need to just get by, or I can't feel this because I have shit to do, or I can't feel this because of all of these different reasons. And I was trying to push through and I was trying to overcome it and I was trying to stay on top of things. And I wasn't actually feeling it. I also didn't have the tools to feel it because I didn't know about somatic work. I didn't know about how to be in my body, how to actually really process emotion. So I was just trying to skim on top of the surface of something that was really blatantly trying to be felt. And that's what made the experience so insufferable. It wasn't the fact that the feeling was present, it was the fact that the feeling was present and I wasn't letting myself feel it.
So when you say resisting a feeling, because I don't know if that's really well understood what that means, it's the thought that the feeling is wrong to feel, or the experience that you're having that you shouldn't be having it. Your reality should be different than it is,
Yeah.
because if you're having this reality, it means A, B, and C about you, which then amplifies the feeling that's already there. So if you're sitting there feeling insecure, if you're making it wrong that you're feeling insecure, then now you're adding shame and insecurity.
Yes, exactly. It's our war with reality. And to bring it into a more practical standpoint of what resistance to a feeling can actually look like in practicality is usually we're just in our heads. Like if someone thinks about a time in their life that was really hard, let's say you were just feeling really sad, like you associate it with feeling sad, and now you don't want to feel sad anymore. Anytime sadness comes up, you're like, if I let myself feel sadness, I'm just going to go back there. That's kind of the story that they tell
Yes.
themselves, right? And so you have this association with this time in your life that it was sadness. But the reality is, you weren't feeling sad. You were thinking sad thoughts and making that wrong. You were spiraling about a situation, thinking about it, thinking about everything about the situation that was upsetting, that you said shouldn't be the way that it was, that you were telling yourself life would be better, I would be better, I would be happier if this situation had turned out differently. You were thinking all of these thoughts that sounded really sad or evoked sad feelings, but you were telling yourself those stories and staying in your head and not actually feeling the sadness. So it was actually you being in your head. You weren't feeling sad. You were avoiding feeling sad through thinking about the situation that made you feel sad, because by thinking about it, you were trying to overcome it. That's all the brain is doing. When we think about a situation over and over and over again, and we're dissecting it and we're repeating it in our minds and we're replaying it over and over again, that's our mind trying to dissect it so that it can come up with a solution to it, so that we can fix it, so that we don't have to feel it. And that is the experience that feels so insufferable.
Cool. So, for those listening who are like, oh, interesting, how do I then switch it up? How do I stop doing the same thing over and over and over again that I'm always doing and choose something different? What would that look like? How would you coach someone through that?
I'm going to keep this
And
really
and
simple.
and what can they expect from that
Yeah,
process? Yeah.
good question. Yeah, very simply put, because I want this to be something that people can take action on, is first just identify what is the discomfort specifically that you are trying to run away from by not making different choices and by continuing to make the same choices. I want you to be specific with this. Is it that by making a different choice, you associate that with stress, or you associate that with feeling guilty, or you associate that with being overwhelmed? Do you associate that with being sad, or you associate that with being heartbroken? Or you associate that with being in shame and discomfort, like you were saying around you making different choices, putting yourself out there was going to force you to be in a position where you were going to have to explain to people what it is that you do for work, and then have to feel the discomfort of not having other people understand it. And that may be feeling a bit shameful or insecure in a way, making you kind of, it would activate a lot of your own insecurities around what it is that you do, right? And so getting really specific for yourself of what it is, what is the specific discomfort or pain that you are trying to avoid through not making a different choice and continuing to make the same choices. And then from there, once you've identified what that discomfort is, I want you to explore what that discomfort actually means. Like, what is insecure? What is feeling guilty? What is feeling sad? If you were talking to an alien who was not from Earth and had no idea what that meant, had no idea what that experience was like, How would you describe to them what feeling sad is? How would you describe to them what feeling uncomfortable and insecure in who you are is? And when you can get really clear on, it's not just this label that we're throwing onto something that we're saying is bad that I don't want to experience. It's like, okay, I'm saying that I don't want to feel uncomfortable and insecure. What I'm really saying is, I don't want to have thoughts, spiraling thoughts that are questioning how other people might be judging me or not getting me. I don't want to be in an experience where I'm so terrified of someone making a negative judgment of me and worrying about whether they're judging me. I don't want to be in a position where I'm feeling this tense contraction inside of my stomach when I could see the look on someone's face that signals to me that they are not understanding what I'm saying or they're questioning me or they might be making a judgment of me. I don't want to have to deal with the discomfort, the raising heart rate in my chest, the closing of my throat, the just feeling of being stuck and vulnerable and in threat. If we can get really, really, really detailed and nuanced with what that experience really is, then we can look at that and we can say, okay, this experience I've just described, where these are the types of thoughts I'm having, this is the physical sensations I'm having in my body, this is what I'm saying I can't deal with. This is what I'm telling myself that I need to stay the same and keep making the same choices and stay in the familiarity that I don't like because it's more important to avoid this. And just seeing it that way might start to open your perspective around, okay, is it really true I need to avoid that? Or is that really something that I can't handle or really something that I'm not okay with experiencing? And I want to invite people into just noticing what it's like for them to identify this is what I'm running away from. I'm telling myself I can't handle it or that that would be worse than feeling how I am feeling right now in the current familiarity of my life that I don't like. And just see how your perspective maybe morphs around that new awareness around what it is that you were actually avoiding. And then from there, I would invite in some somatic and emotional practices that's actually going to get you in tiny bite-sized pieces to just be in your body and be in the experience that you have identified you don't want to experience and just see what it's like in a bite-sized fashion that feels safe. And what that can look like in practice is bringing up a scenario in your mind that's associated with that feeling. So for you, in your example that you were describing, Amanda, it's you're hanging out with a new group of people and they all turn to you and go, "So what do you do for work, Amanda?" And then you start telling them your spiel and then you're watching their faces go like, "Oh." And you can like feel the confusion and the questioning and maybe like a lace of like judgment that they're making behind their response. Put yourself in there in your mind's eye, like you're there now, watching their face change, watching their response to it, and then just notice what happens in your body and welcome that. Just getting curious with what it's like in your body to be there. Noticing where you feel the contraction in your body, noticing where your mind wants to go, noticing just how you respond on a holistic level to that scenario, and then stay present in it and breathe and just question, just subtly, just be in it and question, is this a threat? Does this experience that I'm having in my body and in my mind genuinely feel like a threat? Is this something that I need to avoid? Or is this just a part of my human experience that I get to invite in? That's the process I would take someone through.
Brilliant. I love that. And I want to highlight the power of thought here. The fact that you can visualize your feared scenario, feared outcome, and evoke all of that is proof that it already existed there.
Yes.
It's not being given to you by anything outside of you. It's being evoked through the thought that is creating it from within. And it's always that way
Always.
in every situation and circumstance. When we say you are the creator of your reality, that is what is meant by it,
Yes.
is literally that. Every aspect of your reality, you are creating through the power of your own thought and intentionality. And the more comfortable and safe you can feel inside of who you are. Because what Kelly is saying is not to get rid of that feeling through this exercise, it's to find safety inside of it. When you can do that, what you're doing is you're finding safety inside of who you are. And the safer you feel inside of who you really are, look at what opens up for you. You no longer fear telling people what you do for a living. And then you no longer fear going out and making friends. And then you no longer avoid going out and making friends. And then you're more likely to go out and make friends. You
Yes.
see? And so it all comes back to how comfortable are you inside of who you are? And then
Mhm.
from there, everything else snowballs, and you will have the power to more likely make a different choice.
Yes. How comfortable you are and who you are, and how comfortable you are in the entire spectrum of your human experience,
Yeah.
the full range of your emotional capacity. The safer that we can feel inside of that, we're so free. Because we don't need to orchestrate our life around trying to avoid certain experiences of ourselves and certain emotions, because we trust that that will be okay if we face them. And we know we'll be able to move forward. We know that we won't get trapped there. We know that it will be temporary, and we know it's not nearly as bad as our mind wants to make it seem like it is.
In my opinion, this is what we come here for.
That's
Everything
right.
else is like an illusion and projection of this
Yes.
because this, like the ability to find comfort and safety inside of every expression of you, from that, your potential and opportunity becomes limitless. What limits you is your belief systems about you that create discomfort inside of an aspect of experiencing who you are or who you
That's
believe
right.
yourself to be.
Exactly. I love this conversation.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add to this?
I don't think so. I think that we wrapped that up exactly how I would have wanted to.
Yeah, me too. I would love to hear from you if you're listening to this and you still have questions. Because if you do, ask, and then we can answer
Yes,
them. Because I know that some of these conversations are very high level, but that's how I like to talk about them.
same.
So reach out to us, madness.meaning@gmail.com. Leave us a comment on YouTube or rating and review on our podcast. We really want to hear from you. We want to have a conversation with you. And other than that, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.